Welcome to Perspectives, our interview series at Cologne Jazzweek. Today I have the pleasure to talk to Kit Downes, British pianist, organist and composer. He's to be heard in 3 different formations at this festival this year. But one of my biggest highlights is going to be a solo show at the Cologne Cathedral. So how are you feeling about the big organ? It's one of the biggest in Germany.
Yeah, I'm feeling very excited. I'm also a little bit nervous. But I have this memory of being a kid, maybe 10 or 11, and going into Cologne Cathedral for the first time and being very overwhelmed by that special space. And also seeing one of the organs, the one very, very high up, I think it's 20 meters off the ground, and thinking like, maybe one day I could get to play that organ. I remember having that thought, like, that would be something really amazing to aim for. And I still didn't really think that was ever going to happen until couple of months ago when Yanning suggested it. So I feel very, very honored to be able to play it to start with, let alone play a concert on it.
Wow, so this is like a full circle moment, kind of, then.
Yeah, moment of reckoning. It's a big instrument, and I'm used to playing some big instruments. This is definitely one of the biggest that I've played. And with only a short amount of prep time, to really improvise on it fluently, it's a challenge. I feel right on the edge of what I can do, which is also a very exciting feeling. I was talking to a friend of mine today about that feeling when you suddenly feel nervous about something again, quite vividly. And it doesn't happen maybe so often. The longer that you do it, the longer that you play music and being a professional musician, those situations where you're right at the edge of what you're able to do are not as common as when you're first starting out, of course, but it's a really good sign when you encounter one. That's, I think, what growth feels like, or challenge and expanding one's horizons.
So who specifically introduced you to the organ, or what made you try to play it? Because I guess you started as a piano player before, right?
Kind of, roughly the same time actually. I started playing cello when I was very, very young, but then I joined a choir in Norwich, the Norwich Cathedral Choir. It's like a boys' choir. And they have a very beautiful organ, Harrison instrument at the cathedral. And I would hear it getting played every day when I was singing for the services. And I started taking a few lessons with Catherine Deanish, who was the organist at that time. And she showed me how the instrument broadly works, what kind of registrations, what sounds go with what other sounds, how to pedal, these sort of mechanical and orchestral elements of the instrument. I didn't learn so much repertoire on it, but I learned enough to be able to start improvising on it. And that's actually how I got into improvising, was at a young age. This was maybe around 11 or 12 years old, starting to improvise, sometimes in services. And then I became like organist is a bit of a grand term for what I was doing, but me and my dad would go around regional churches playing for some of the smaller churches that didn't have an organist. And I would play improvising at the beginning and at the end, and my dad would play the hymns, which was a very nice couple of years that happened. And then the more I started improvising, my mum gave me a Oscar Peterson CD at one point, because she knew I was interested in making stuff up. And that was a logical next step, she thought. And then I disappeared down a kind of jazz rabbit hole for a while, for quite a long time. And then as I was approaching 30, I wanted to create more color and more orchestration and have more sound, tonal possibilities, and particularly when I started playing with Tom Challenger, a saxophone player from the UK that I play a lot with. We had a residency at somewhere that had a very fine pipe organ. And I thought, it's been a long time, but why not see where I'm at with that instrument, see if I can find a context for the language that I have currently, that I had then at that moment when I was approaching 30, all this jazz language and contemporary classical music that I was into, and all sorts of things collected across the way of just doing lots of gigs in London. And then thought maybe that could be an outlet for this desire to have more control over color and texture and timbre. And so I revisited the instrument, but with what I collected on the way musically. And then since then it's felt very natural to be playing it. It's one of my first instruments. it's not one that I was really taught in college, so I feel like there's an element of self-discovery, and I don't have this kind of idea of a teacher in my head looking down at what I'm doing.
Yeah, this would have been my question. Like, the organ is so much connected to all that majestic and religious and the literature of all the Western classical composers. But you managed to find your own voice, and to me it also sounds like you're kind of using it like a synthesizer, and you use your different colors. So what's the first thing you do when you're playing in different towns, different organs? How do you adjust to all these different instruments? Because I guess you don't have much practice time, like days before, or maybe it's just one day.
Yeah, I guess the first things I go to is like what's similar between it and many other organs, and what's completely unique about it. Because certain builders have certain ways of making instruments that are familiar, and also depending on the state of the organ, there are certain things that I probably know in advance are going to be a certain kind of way, especially if I know the size of the organ in advance. And if I know how old it is and what style it's built in, like Romantic or Baroque or whatever. So there are those things which are kind of common. A big one is like the layout at the console, which is, for example, what's intimidating about Cologne Cathedral is that there's so many options at that console. That you want to use all of it. You want to use the whole instrument. You want to give all of the color that it's got. But to do that, you have to have a real command of the console, of the interface of it. That's what makes it difficult. It's not necessarily the amount of sound that you have to play with. That's there, and it works already. It's how you can kind of access it and how quickly you can make those decisions, especially if you're improvising. Say I'm doing something and I want to change it up very suddenly. That takes a very specific load of actions to get to that one gesture that on a piano could just be articulated with volume and touch very quickly, but you wouldn't get all of that color that you do with the organ. So different puzzles, but just spending a bit of time with it, and I think trying to play into what you feel are the strengths of each instrument and how it sits in the room.
It definitely sounds very challenging, because you have to kind of learn a new instrument every time you play.
In a way.
Or
There are definitely elements of that. And if you want to show it, if you really want to explore it fully, it's nice to think of it as a new instrument.
And maybe there are also coming some surprises, which
definitely things go wrong in my concerts all the time. I think that's sort of inevitable, really. That when it's a part of improvising, just as a general modus operandus, that something will go wrong eventually, like life. And part of the nice thing about improvising is how you can deal with it in the moment, and your fluency, and how quickly you can be present again and not dwell on things or worry about things that are coming up, but just being in your moment. And that's the same on any instrument, I think.
The image I have of you preparing the solo concert, the concert is like, it's evening, it's dark in the church, only a few candlelights are there, and then you're all alone there. Do you sometimes ever feel solitary when you prepare that kind of show? Yeah,
not only in the preparation, but in the concert itself. I think that's part of what I enjoy about it, actually, is that I always ask to be alone in the organ loft, to lock the door, so I don't like there being anyone up there with me, or cameras, or I like it to be a solitary experience. Well, it's never really solitary. It's you and this enormous instrument. I mean, it's like being with an orchestra, really. But it's such a concentration thing that I think and it's also, you're often like 60 feet away from the people that are listening to it. So the chance of you really feeling the thing together as an audience is quite limited in that way. It becomes more about feeling the space communally together, like being at I don't know how to describe it, but in a weird way, it puts some distance between you and the music, because you're playing an instrument that's often like really far away, and an audience that's listening to it really far away. So the whole thing becomes kind of solitary for everybody, really. And there's something like weirdly nice about that you can just get lost in this big space, moment in time, and everyone feels what they feel, and it slightly detaches you from the performative side of things. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Whereas solo piano, it's about you at the piano alone, like, will he make it? Whatever. And
you can see everything.
and everyone can see everything you're doing, and they can see how you're thinking and what you're going through. And I like that. I'm just, because it's almost like the organ just comes alive, and then you can just, you don't have to be observed in it. And I find that closer to something of the way that I make music when I'm practicing or when I'm really by myself, which stands a chance of being, I don't know, more myself in that moment, I guess.
It's beautiful.
We'll see, it might suck.
So the organ is one of the oldest instruments. I think it's been existing for like 2,000 years. My last question would be, if you could travel in time, where would you go?
Is this organ tourism we're talking about?
No. It could also be the future.
Future organs. I mean, there's kind of a discussion of where the organ is heading on a builder level. I mean, that's kind of always how the organ changes, is from the building perspective first, and then the musicians catch up to what's possible on the instrument from how it's been changed in the terms of the way it's built. And the discussion now is often about the hyper organ, is what people. So I'm still not 100% sure exactly what that means, but I know it's a sort of. I see it as like a family term of expanding like possibilities on the instruments, and also having instruments talking to each other from similar consoles or from different places, and like huge step forwards technically on the instrument, which is always how it's been with that instrument. And it's interesting to see how far that advances before it just becomes so different to organ historically that it becomes almost just like another keyboard instrument in a way. Yes. And I think that's a fascinating line, and there are composers and improvisers out there that are right at the forefront of that. There's a guy called Niels Henrik Aschheim, who's he's the organist at Concerthus in Stavanger, and he does some really wild, very cool conceptual, almost like installation artwork kind of things with organ. A very serious organ player and composer himself as well, but his brain is also fully at the forefront of where the technology of that instrument is at the moment. So that's super cool and very inspiring, and it sort of suits these megalomaniac compositional improvisatorial brains that a lot of my organ friends seem to have. So the instrument sort of, it's a bit like chicken and egg, the music leads the development, the building, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But that didn't really, to go back in time to any period for any reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's pretty good now. Like, I don't have to fight in a war or myself. I mean, I don't know. I guess I would have loved to have been in New York in the 60s, early 60s. I would have loved to have seen Coltrane Quartet, I guess, the seminal quartet, or Bill Evans Trio. I would have, to hear those live and to be at like the Vanguard and hear Bill Evans's touch from like that far away would have blown my mind.
All right, thank you so much. Don't forget to buy tickets for the 3rd of September to hear Kit Downes at the Cologne Cathedral, and keep on supporting live music and buy all the records you can get. Thanks.